Hello everyone, hi and welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, my name is Glory. If you're a returning subscriber, my name is still Glory. So today, as you can tell from the topic, we're going to be talking about boundaries today. Honestly, this topic I think it's been long coming for me personally. Well, if you've been following me for the past 2 to 3 videos, you probably would have seen it coming. So basically, this series is actually titled I Will, which means I teach what I learn. This is basically the first episode on this particular series, the first episode on I Will, and it's obviously going to be talking about boundaries. And so basically, most of what I'll be saying, they're not originally my thoughts. So I'm currently reading a book right now. The name is Boundary Boss, and most of what I'll be saying was gotten from this book because that's the whole point of the series. I'm teaching as I'm learning. As I'm learning, I'm teaching, right? So it's basically just me sharing like what I'm learning at the moment or currently in my life, or but the catch behind it is that most of the thoughts are not originally mine, and I would obviously like give credit to the author of the book, and you can also go purchase the book if you need to read it yourself. So yes, back to what we were saying. The reason why I decided to make this video on boundaries is because I think a lot of people struggle with making like that setting and keeping and maintaining boundaries, including me. Why are boundaries actually important? Boundaries are important because they help you set clear and permissible ways in which other people are allowed to treat you. So boundary setting basically includes you setting your boundaries and then having clear consequences for repeat boundary offenders. So what that means is that you have a set of boundaries for the different areas of your life or the different aspects of your life, and then you also have consequences, clear consequences, things that would happen or would not happen if those boundaries are crossed, right? So basically you're setting your boundaries, and then you're also setting the consequence for when your boundaries are violated consciously or unconsciously by other people, right? So the whole point of this video is to introduce you to the basics, basically just boundary basics. I think that's what I'm going to call them. I think that's what she called them in the book, boundary basics, right? The different kinds of boundaries, so that you even know when your boundaries are being violated, right? So if you don't even know what a boundary is, or like the different kinds of boundaries that exist or are supposed to exist, how would you know when somebody is violating your boundaries, or maybe even you yourself are violating your boundaries? You know how we have physical boundaries. So when I say physical boundaries, so if you remember, like in some movies, or not just even movies, but like when you're walking around certain areas or certain places, you would see a sign, like maybe like a white wood with red written on it. Maybe it says violators will be prosecuted, or keep clear, or keep out, things like that. These are like physical signs that show you that this place is, you're not supposed to cross this place, right? This place is out of that's the word, this place is out of bounds, right? So naturally people just respect that. And tying this to boundaries, it's easier to respect these type of boundaries because they are physically, like you can see them physically, right? It's basically saying keep out, it's saying out of danger, it's saying violators will be prosecuted. So naturally you're not going to be drawn to go to that place, right? But then this becomes tougher when it comes to personal boundaries, because personal boundaries, you don't write it on the placard, you don't carry it on your forehead, right? They are invisible, and most of the time they have to be established with words, most of the time repeatedly, right? And also with actions. So because personal boundaries are invisible, that's why it's easier for people to cross them. It's easier for people to violate them because they're not like the huge physical signs we see saying keep out of bounds, violators will be prosecuted, right? So if you as a person don't take up that responsibility to repeatedly establish with your words and your actions what you condone as a person, or what are your boundaries in the different aspects, or like we'll talk about that later, but like what are your different boundaries in the different categories, right? If you don't take up that responsibility, people will keep crossing it, and sometimes they wouldn't even know they're crossing it because, number one, what did I say? Boundaries are invisible. Personal boundaries, most of it are invisible, right? So people can't see things that are invisible right? So you need to spell it out for them so that they know that, okay, we can't do this, or like this is not acceptable for this person, things like that. So the next part of this video is going to be talking about the 5 different kinds of boundaries. And within these categories, your boundaries can be porous, your boundaries can be rigid, or your boundaries can be healthy. So stick with me, you would understand as we go on, right? Okay, so the first type of boundary is the physical boundary. Basically, this has to do with your body. Physical boundaries has to do with anything relating to your body. So this includes who has permission to touch you, how they touch you, including like how much personal space you require, right? So basically, someone violating your physical boundary would look something like barging into the shower when you're having a shower, not knocking on your door before they come into your room, using your personal items. I actually have a personal story with this one. So reading this book was what helped me recognize that, oh, my personal boundary was actually violated when that happened. But, basically, this was what happened. So there was a time that someone, not a friend actually, came to live with me or came to stay with me for a while in my room, in my personal room, in my house. But then because the person is my guest, the person stayed in my room, right? So the next day, this person wanted to have a shower, right? I was like, yeah, right, go ahead, like use the shower. You can use my, shower gel and, soap and toothpaste and stuff like that. Stuff like that is not personal, right? Right? So I was like, yeah, I just thought, okay, like just natural common sense, stuff like that. And so yeah, this person, takes a bath, comes out of the shower. My towel basically was hanging on my door. The person comes out of the bathroom. I was actually watching a movie. I remember I was watching a movie, and the person takes my towel from where it was hanging and starts cleaning their body. I was so stunned and shocked. Like, I was very stunned and shocked. I couldn't say anything. I don't know why I couldn't say anything. Okay, well, I do, because, this person basically was like a mentor to me, right? Yeah, the person was occupying the role of being a mentor to me in my life at that point, at that moment. And so, like, I really didn't know how to approach that conversation, right? But I was like, I just knew this wasn't like normal, like this wasn't okay, but I really didn't know what to say. So I just let the person use the towel. And as if that was not enough, I just thought, okay, I could just forgive that, yeah, right? I could just wash the towel and stuff like that, that's okay. And then the person goes ahead to, start dressing up, because I think the person was leaving the house or something. And the person puts on my bra. Right? The person puts on my bra. And then I'm like, this surely is not normal. This surely is not okay. But like I said, I really didn't know how to approach the conversation. And so, at that point, now I know, then I knew it wasn't good, but I didn't know that, I know that I didn't feel good about it, but I didn't say anything. But now I know that, okay, that's why, because like, that's a personal boundary that was crossed, and I should have said something if I knew better, right? Well, now I know better, but like, if I knew better, then I probably would have said something like, this, I don't really appreciate you doing this, or like, sorry, I don't share my personal stuff. This is too personal for me. Other things you can use, like perfumes and creams and stuff like that. But then this is something that goes directly on my body. It's not something I would want to share, stuff like that, right? So, yeah, that's basically like, this is basically to explain what physical boundaries mean. So it's basically like your body. It basically has to do with, people touching you, how they touch you, because some people... I'm from Nigeria, and so, I just remember those days where I would go to the market and, people selling on the road, the guy is selling on the road, everybody's touching you, and you're just irritated, right? Well, it's good because you're irritated, because at least you have that antenna, you know that, okay, this is not right, so you know that something is being violated here, right? But then I know that there are some places where, like, you don't even have the strength, you're just going to be, especially when you're in the market, when you go to the market or something, if you're in Nigeria, right, you go to the market and the men are just holding you, you're walking, someone just holds you back, and then you're like, I don't know if you'll have the time to start establishing personal boundaries there, but like, you can tell them off and stuff like that. But yeah, when it comes to, let's say, a natural social setting where someone grabs you in a way that you don't like, or in a manner that you don't like, or someone is in your personal space, that's probably something you should address, right? That's an example of your physical boundaries being violated, right? Or someone touches you in a way that you don't like as a person, you know, be you a guy, like, and personal boundaries are not for females only. I hope we all know that. So even as a guy, if a lady touches you in a way you don't appreciate, right, please tell the lady off. Tell the person off, that you don't appreciate the touch and stuff like that. You too, as a guy, as a human being, right, we all have boundaries. We all have rights to have our personal boundaries, right? Okay, number 2 would be sexual boundaries. For sexual boundaries, even within a relationship, if you're in a relationship, you get to decide how, where, when, and with whom sexual touch is acceptable, right? Because someone forcing you or someone coercing you to be sexual with them, or someone making like lewd comments, or someone purposefully trying to arouse you sexually without your consent, that's a boundary violation, right? You should speak up. It's your right to speak up, whether you're a guy or you're a girl. If you're in a relationship with someone, they're touching you in a way you don't like, they are trying to arouse you in a way that you don't like, basically, or making comments or things like that in ways that you don't like sexually without your expressed consent, that is a sexual boundary being violated, and you should make that clear, basically. The third one is material boundaries. Honestly, I didn't know. I could have guessed, okay, physical boundaries and sexual boundaries, yes, that one is like, that's very common sense, but I didn't know that material boundaries existed. And when I read it in this book for the first time, and I was like, oh, we're supposed to have material boundaries too. And so basically, for material boundaries, you basically determine how others may or may not have access to your material possessions. For example, this includes like your car, your money, your clothes, and other material possessions, your other things, your laptop. So you basically determine who has access to these things, whether you're going to lend it to your friend or lend it to your relatives, and also like under what conditions are you lending these things out. So for me, back home, if you remember, growing up, there are some places that visitors are not allowed to enter in the house, right? If they come in, they can only stay in the living room. Maybe, like, say there's a downstairs living room and there's like an upstairs or something. Visitors are, like in my house personally, visitors are only allowed downstairs in the living room. They're not allowed in the kitchen. They're not allowed upstairs. They're not allowed past, the downstairs living room. And depending on the level of relationship we have with that guest, that is now what increases the level of access that they have to our space, to our family space at home, right? To the family house, right? So obviously, if an auntie comes in, an auntie can go upstairs and stuff like that, but like a stranger, like a visitor, a guest that we don't really know, right? Or is not even a relative, right? The person can't, go upstairs, right? So those things are they're actually boundaries, but I didn't know that they were called like material boundaries. So basically, like I said, it's basically has to do with your material possessions. Your house is a material possession, right? So you basically determine who has access to where and how much access that they have in your house, right? Also, things like there's some homes you go to, guests, when you're coming in, you have to leave your shoes at the door. That is also a material boundary, right? It's your house, so you get to determine what is acceptable in your house and what is not acceptable in your house, right? Remember, basically boundaries are what teach us. Basically, boundaries are supposed to they're basically things that tell other people how to treat us, right? Yeah. So boundaries basically establish permissible ways in which other people are allowed to treat us, right? So basically, when it comes to material boundaries, you are responsible. Well, boundaries of any sort, when it comes to your material possessions, you are responsible for that. So also, I just remembered, when it comes to, I think, a lot of the ones we struggle with is, especially when it comes to like money, especially. I know that, I still quite struggle with that as well, and especially when it comes to lending out money to people and things like that. Sometimes you lend people money against your own will. Yes, right. And so that is something obviously personally I have to work on, and I know that there are other people as well who struggle with that as well. Like, they can't say no when people ask them for things. Well, that's the purpose of this video, is that you even recognize that, okay, this is something that is not supposed to be happening. So how can you take the step towards having a healthy boundary when it comes to these things, right? So the next type of boundary is mental boundaries. So for mental boundaries, you should know that you as a person, you define your thoughts, you define your values, you define your opinions, right? And so in order to have healthy mental boundaries, you actually have to first know what you believe. You have to be clear on what you believe, because it's when you're clear on what you believe, that's when you can realize and see when somebody is crossing that boundary, right? And what does crossing a mental boundary look like? This looks like someone making demands instead of requests. It looks like someone disparaging your beliefs. And what does that mean? It looks like someone undervaluing, someone depreciating, underestimating your beliefs. It also looks like someone disrespecting your no in order to get their way, right? So basically, people who cannot deal with no when someone tells them no. For us, we want, especially when we have boundaries, right? We want other people to respect our boundaries, but we don't understand that other people to have boundaries that we need to respect. It's a two-way thing. Like, I think that's what they say. Respect is a two-way thing, right? It's that you respect me and I respect you, right? And so I think it just never registered that in as much as I had my own boundaries and in as much as I wanted people to respect my no when I said no, I also have to respect their no when they say no as well. I may not like it, right? I may want them to say yes. Obviously, you don't want to receive a no, but then when someone says no, just respect it, because when you say no, you would want someone to respect it. It's not going to be fun, I promise you. You're not going to like it, but then they'll also not like it when you say no, and they'll still have to respect that. So you too respect them when they say no. So I think that's what I used to have an issue with. But then, like I said, in recent years, I've been coming to understand that, okay, I'm not the only person that has values in this world. I'm not the only person that has boundaries in this world, right? I'm not the only person that wants to be respected. In as much as I want to be respected, other people too want to be respected as well. And so it's a two-way thing. And then what does having a healthy mental boundary look like? So having a healthy mental boundary looks like you being able to listen to other people with an open mind, even if they have different opinions from you, but being able to listen to them with an open mind, but still be able to hold on to your core values and still be able to hold on to your beliefs as a person. That's when you know that your mental boundary is healthy, because you're able to hold yourself, hold your beliefs, hold your core beliefs, whilst giving the people the space to air out their opinions, whilst being able to listen to other people even if you disagree. I think that's the hard part. Even if you disagree, you should still be able to listen to them, give them the space to air out their opinions, air out their thoughts, and still hold on to what you believe. That is you having a healthy mental boundary. The last boundary is emotional boundary. So when it comes to emotional boundaries, you have to know that you're responsible for your feelings, just as other people are also responsible for their feelings as well. Having healthy emotional boundaries basically prevent you from giving spontaneous criticism or giving unsolicited advice, right? I think the unsolicited advice, that one comes from you having, the urge to always want to fix, even when they're not asking you. So having healthy emotional boundaries basically prevents you from blaming other people for how you feel. You're able to take responsibility for that. Your feelings, they're your own. And on the flip side, vice versa, it also prevents you from accepting blame for emotions that are not yours. So basically accepting the blame for other people's emotions and how they feel, right? Having an unhealthy emotional boundary looks like feeling guilty for someone else's issues or feeling guilty for someone else's negative feelings. So an emotional boundary violation looks like, someone who invalidates your feelings, someone who is telling you how you feel or telling you how you should feel, or someone asking you intrusive questions that you're not comfortable with, right? So those are examples of your emotional boundaries being violated. With all of that being said, my closing thoughts would be that don't ever think that self-sacrifice proves that you're a good person. Sacrificing yourself, that's the only way to prove that you're a good person. That actually shows that you have, very disordered boundaries, or like there's an issue with your personal boundaries somewhere. Either your mental or emotional boundary, there's an issue with it somewhere, right? Creating healthy boundaries basically keeps you from emotional harm. It prevents you from emotional harm. It keeps your personal dignity as a person intact, and then it strengthens your relationships, including the relationship that you have with yourself, which is the most important relationship, right? And so I hope this video has helped you with boundary basics. See you in the next episode, whatever that content is.